Coaches, athletes, fitness, friends, we're talking about training season today. We have two different kinds of clients. Most of us work with two different populations. It's either going to be general pop, okay, people that are focusing on fitness and vitality, longevity, and then people that are athletes, okay, and these guys are looking to for maximum physical potential. That's what MPP stands for, maximum physical potential relative to the sport. They are two different populations, okay? How do we program, how do we progress each one? What we have to understand is that for sport, we're looking at a short time domain, a short trajectory, and for general population, we're looking at a very long trajectory. So those are the mindsets of the two. This is going to be sustainable. This is going to be unsustainable over time. Sustainable, unsustainable. Let's talk about the athlete first, okay? The first chunk or the first phase of their training season is going to be an accumulation phase. And this is going to all be based off of relative sport demand. So accumulation is going to be volume or reps required in order to compete in the sport. We have to make sure that this athlete is able to compete in the sport, and so that they can compete with, or they can keep up with whatever the sport's volume demands. So if that's a 5K, if that's a triathlon, if that is a certain amount of reps of chest bar pull-ups and burpees and whatever else for the mixed modal, like the CrossFit athlete, or if that is a certain amount of sprints being able to be done in a time domain, basketball, soccer, that kind of stuff, field court sports. Volume and reps. So that's going to be the first phase. After an accumulation phase, we have what's called an intensification phase. And this is kind of all RPE, rate of perceived exertion, based off of what the sport's demand is. So if the demand of the sport, in order to be competitive in the sport, requires you to lift X amount of pounds or kilos, weightlifting, powerlifting, then we are training to look at where we currently are and then look at where the sport's demand is and close that gap. Okay, that's our goal for the athlete, closing that functional gap. Okay, RPE, rate of perceived exertion, understanding what the demand of the sport is, either for pace, so it's a 5K, marathon, or if it is intensity level as far as weight lifted or whatever else in order to be competitive in the sport. That might be CrossFit, that might be powerlifting, that might be weightlifting, those kinds of things. Okay. Then we have pre-competition. So this is going to look like competition. Okay? So if you're getting ready for a meet, right, then your pre-competition phase will probably look like, for weightlifting, do a couple heavy singles of the snatch and then a couple heavy singles of the clean and jerk, because that's what you're going to do when you go to a meet. Okay, if you're doing a CrossFit competition, it might look like some basic couplets or triplets and a chipper or whatever else over the course of 2 days, 3 days, depending on the level of the event. Okay, the further you are from competition, the more segmented and broken down your training is going to look like. Okay, and the closer you are to competition, the more your training is going to look like the actual event. Okay, so that's going to be pre-competition, and finally we have competition. So the goal is to peak for the competition. So if you're a court, field, sport, basketball, soccer, that kind of stuff, then you're peaking for a season, right? A couple months, right? And during that couple months of time, you'll have a base kind of phase of maintenance phase for those athletes, okay? If you're peaking for an event like track and field, for a single meet, for weightlifting, for CrossFit, then we're peaking for a single day, weekend, or small period of time, okay? That's what we're peaking for. That's what our competition is going to look like. And then finally, we have down regulation, which is super important because we put so much effort in such a small period of time. We have to down regulate. Whatever the stress of the organism, the human body organism, whatever the stress that body is under, we've got to take time away. We've got to take time and rest. So play another sport, get out of the gym, get away from your current sport, spend some time with friends and family, and then focus on your recovery. Make sure you're getting enough sleep, eating well, all that kind of stuff. Stuff you should already be doing, okay? Down regulate, and then we repeat it all over again. So this might be your junior year of college basketball, right? This might be a phase leading up to a sanctional event for Granite Games for CrossFit. Okay, this could be a couple of different things, but ultimately this is all built off of the sport in which you're competing in. If we swing over here, we're looking at general population. The goal is vitality. Ultimately, think of it as an investment. Okay, these guys, your goal is that ultimately, kind of morbid, but reality is the last 10 years of your life, you're not sitting in a wheelchair and you don't have someone else wiping your butt for you and you can get up and down your own stairs. That's what these guys are after, okay? That's what these guys are truly after. It's a long, long trajectory. Now, the goal, the thing that we're going to start out with first, opposed to an accumulation or pouring tons of volume on, first, we're looking at refinement of movement patterns. We look at the basic movement patterns and then we ask this client, we go, okay, let me see you move, and then we focus on refining that. So this is motor control, and then this is going to be time under tension. Right? So in order to move better at a certain movement, we need to spend more time practicing that movement, right? That makes sense. So tempo work, position work, that kind of stuff. And then after the refinement phase, we have pretty decent control over our movement patterns, and we'll move into an accumulation phase, which just means now we're going to do a little bit more work. So we've learned the technique, and now we want to be a little bit more consistent with this technique while under some level of fatigue based off of some local muscle, like repetition exposure, like that kind of stuff. Accumulation. So basically, a good example of this might be sets of 3 repetitions of the squat, and then accumulation, now we go to sets of 5 repetitions of the squat. And refinement might have a tempo. Accumulation, the tempo might be reduced or taken out completely. Okay? And finally, we go into intensification, and this is relative, right? So instead of over here, we have a goal that we're aiming for. We have a kind of like an end race or competition goal weight or amount of reps or split time that we want to achieve, and we know we're here and we're trying to close that gap. We're not doing that here for general population. We're just identifying where we are, and then we're trying to move the needle ever so slowly over the course of this person's lifetime until eventually they're a master, and then we're trying to resist entropy the best way that we can, okay? Intensification, so now we're adding stress to the organism. Every organism, doesn't matter how old or young, needs to be exposed to stress in order for it to adapt. Now the stress is relative. Some people might find that doing push-ups, 2 push-ups unbroken, is stressful, right? Some other people may not find that that's stressful at all, right? So intensification, this stress that we're applying to the human organism in order to create an adaptation or a stress response is going to be relative, okay? It should be tailored to that person. And then ultimately, once we've kind of stressed the organism and we've created some sort of adaptation response, then we're going to start all over again, and we're going to refine the movement pattern. We might create some sort of variation. And if this person is much more advanced in their training age, when we come back around and we refine the movement pattern again, we might create a variation to the movement pattern that we've never worked on before. And now our goal is to make that position or that pattern better, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So two different populations. We have general population. Really, ultimately, the goal is to resist entropy and make those last 10 years really good. You get up and down the stairs on your own. You're able to eat your own food by yourself, maybe cook your own food, go to the bathroom, get up from the toilet, that kind of stuff. Okay? That's their focus. The athlete is unsustainable work capacity relative to the sport demands that they want to compete in. Now, I love this because this person, all of these people will probably eventually graduate to this. Yep. And I love calling it graduating. It's true. There's a couple clients that I work with specifically that we have a kind of like an end period of their competitive season or their competitive like pursuits and endeavors, and that end point is their graduation point into being general population. Now, what does that look like? That's going to be different for every single person, but navigating this well, especially for these high performance athletes, because they'll have a bit of a hole or a gap in their life, navigating this really well is going to be very important. So there's some considerations to think about for training season relative to an athlete versus the general population. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember,